Okay, I hope you can all hear me. I see some nodding, that is always good. This is confirmation and cooperation virtually across the globe. Welcome, it is 2 minutes past 7 o'clock here in New York. My name is Stefan Schweinfest, I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to this event. It is the opening of the 2024 Statistical Commission season. So I'm very excited and happy that we are all connected here around the globe. We have, from the COVID Corona time, maintained the habit of a series of seminars that lead up to the Statistical Commission actual meeting on the 27th of February here in New York at UN headquarters. That is generally a good idea, I believe, because it allows more people to participate, not only the people. Our Statistical Commission are, of course, the chief statisticians in the room when we meet in New York, but our statistical global family or global community is much bigger, and I'm very happy. I'm now looking at the number up there on the screen, 140, and I've scrolled down the list of participants a little bit, and I see many familiar names from all over the world. So welcome, a very warm welcome to this first high-level webinar under the 2024 Statistical Commission. The topic is Beyond GDP, or GDP and Beyond. Why did we choose this topic as the first? Because when we talk to the very senior management of my organization, I'm really talking about the Secretary General or the Deputy Secretary General, that is one topic that is on their mind. Of course, we know as a statistical community, we talk about lots of topics, but it's only very few that reach the highest level attention. And one of the contexts in the United Nations here at this moment is the so-called Summit of the Future that we will organize here in the United Nations headquarters in September 2024. And the Secretary General had suggested that a reflection on how we go beyond GDP and develop broader measures of progress, sustainability, and well-being is on that agenda. So, of course, we as statisticians have to play a role. We own, as a statistical commission, our good old GDP. And as I say in all of my meetings, senior management, I like my good old GDP. I think it has done an excellent job of bringing us all together. It's been a huge success story of the United Nations and the Statistical Commission, I believe. And if there are problems, we are all aware of the problems, but it's more with the use of the GDP than the actual concept of the GDP. And I sometimes jokingly say, if you are trying to eat your soup with a fork, then it's not the fault of the fork that it's a little bit difficult. You may just not be using the right tool. So I think that gains traction, that logic, that GDP is doing a fantastic job for what it's supposed to do, but we need to go beyond, of course, to understand and develop broader measures and a metric for GDP and beyond. Now, it's not on the Commission agenda as such, but because it's on the radar of the politicians, I'm always a little bit nervous, because sometimes these political processes, they don't move for quite a while, and then they start moving very, very quickly. And I think what I want to make sure is that we as a statistical community have our rightful place at the table when this is being discussed. We know this is both a political and a technical issue. Of course, we want to contribute our expertise on the technical side and leave the political aspects to the politicians. But we need to be prepared. We need to stand by. And I'm sure many of you have similar situations in your respective countries. So the purpose of this event is to put us all on the same page. What's happening right now, where we are, what are the different work streams that we have. And I'm very happy that I have a dream team here of speakers. And we'll kick it off with my dear friend and colleague, Anu Peltola, who is the acting chief of the UNCTAD statistics program, who has worked with me and a dear colleague from UNDP of helping the Secretary General to develop a policy brief on this topic. And so she will give us the institutional context. And then we will have Peter Harper and Peter van der Ven, our dream team for the SNA review. Pete is the project manager, and Peter, we have Peter and Peter, is the lead editor for the 2025 SNA. So that's, of course, our statistical contribution to this discussion. But the argument will be, and we will show you, that the new SNA has many, many tools that go well beyond GDP. Then we have Mr. Richard Hayes, who's the Deputy Director and Deputy Chief Economist of the ONS, Office of National Statistics in the UK, who has been leading the discussion, a sprint series under our network of economic statisticians under the Statistical Commission, where we discussed this topic and tried to make a bit of an inventory of what's currently going on and what are the ideas and the visions for the future in terms of statistical tools. So we want to present that. And then Gabriela Vukovic, the chair of the Statistical Commission, will help me to wrap this all up and connect again back to the question, what is the role of the Statistical Commission in all of this? How should we position ourselves? And I would also like to thank my colleague, Mr. Amar Noor, who is a senior advisor in the Office of the Director of the UN Statistics Division, who helped me with the preparation of this event and the concept note. So we hope that we'll take the first half for the presentations and the information sharing, and then the second half for questions and discussions. So please actively participate and give us some guidance and ideas that you have and help us to shape our future battle plan in this important topic. So with this introduction, I'll pass over the floor to Anu for the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Dear colleagues, I realize that I'll be kicking off the new season of the UN Statistical Commission with the first presentation. So here we go. So I will give you an update on the UN initiative on Beyond GDP and the related high-level political discussions in the UN and with member states. In June last year, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres released a policy brief on going beyond GDP to value what counts. It is based on a UN-wide report which pulls together data, research, and expertise to support member states in this thinking. This work involved the entire UN system, including the IMF and the World Bank, and it's inspired by the research and initiatives carried out across countries and internationally by many organizations, including in the EU and the OECD and other regions. I had the honor to co-lead this process representing the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and working jointly with Stefan from UNDESA and the chief economist George Gray from the United Nations Development Programme. First, why do we talk about beyond GDP nearly 15 years after the famous report by Stiglitz, Sen, Fitoussi on measurement of economic performance and social progress? And it's over 30 years after the Brundtland report on our common future, which introduced the concept of well-being now, in the future, and for everyone. This initiative was called by the UN Secretary General as he has great concerns about the compounding crisis we're seeing. There's an increasing disconnect between economic growth and well-being, and the Human Development Index, for one, has dropped for 2 years in a row after 30 years of progress. Economic growth is placing heavy stress on the environment, and due to climate change, scientists warn that we may be missing a rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. The need to move beyond GDP is not new, but it is perhaps more relevant now than ever before. And what is meant by moving beyond GDP, I think it's more to mean that we need to look beyond just short-term economic gains. This work also stems from the 2030 Agenda. It's the very last target, 1719, which asks us to develop measures of progress on sustainable development that complement GDP. and to support statistical capacity building. The UN has also our Common Agenda report from 2021, which calls to urgently find measures of progress that complement GDP. It may be interesting to know how the UN Secretary General approaches GDP and the need for additional indicators. So therefore, I was thinking I will quote a few things he said. He said that the GDP is the most widely used metric to measure countries' economic progress, and that it has become a proxy for wealth creation and development progress. It will continue to be an important metric. But he also said that there's a growing recognition that GDP overlooks human activities that sustain life and contribute to well-being, while placing value also on those activities that damage us and deplete our planet. He noted that human progress depends on many factors, from levels of poverty and hunger to inequality and social cohesion and vulnerability to climate breakdown and other shocks. So it's true, but GDP was never intended to measure all of these aspects. So therefore, we need something as strong as GDP to measure the other aspects that matter. And when GDP emerged, the world population was around 2.3 billion. We are now at 8 billion and growing. While the GDP helped to reconstruct the economy of the wartime, and it gives national economies really a measurable identity, now we struggle with many different kinds of challenges that will need to be measured potentially with something as solid and strong as GDP, but how can we achieve that is another question. So the UN White Report proposes a framework to value what counts with 6 elements based on an analysis of official statistics to see where we have challenges. So this proposes to look at well-being, equality, and respect for life and the planet, which equals sustainability. And the framework underlines the need to build resilience, to address vulnerabilities, to have participatory governance, and it also has a role for the economy to have innovative and ethical economies that can help solve our problems that we're facing. There's also a proposal to develop a value dashboard of 10 to 20 key indicators that meet the set quality criteria. That can be kind of like the same as we have as quality criteria for official statistics, but something that is inclusive of environmental and social aspects of development. The future metrics must build on what exists, the statistical frameworks and capacities, and in particular SDG indicators and all the work done for the SDG indicator framework. So we carried out a mapping to see whether there are connections between the 6 elements and the SDGs. The darker the color, the more there are connections. And we found that these are very much interlinked. The SDG indicator framework, while it was a big challenge and there are so many indicators, it has really brought everyone together to improve availability of data and statistics on social and environmental aspects. And this has also required collaboration between agencies nationally and internationally like never seen before. So we should really base on the results of this work any further metrics for the future. So while the idea is to end up with a small set of key indicators, the framework and related policies could be informed by the entire data university, the data universe, sorry. There will be a need to ensure solid statistical foundations, that we have granular data so that we can really look at population groups, vulnerabilities, have disaggregated data. So key indicators will not do the trick only. We have to have also the basis. We will soon hear from Peter and Pete on the ongoing update of the system of national accounts and how this work could inform the initiative on Beyond GDP. The system of environmental economic accounts is another important framework to potentially host some key indicators related to the environment. And there are other statistical frameworks and population censuses, for instance, that will be needed in this work. So lots of the information is already there, for many countries. There are many indicator initiatives also that we can draw upon. And potentially, as we have seen so many indicator initiatives, now is the time to really take stock and try and see how these could converge to form a common language and practice in the future, like we have for the SNA. This SNA provides a language for statisticians, economists, policymakers. Something like that is missing for many other areas. At least it would not be as strong as the SNA. As mentioned, the indicator set needs to meet the quality criteria set for official statistics, but also convey strong and clear messages that are actionable and intuitive for policymaking. One of the many reasons behind the success of GDP is also that it's country-owned. This too is a universal agenda, so all countries must be able to compile the indicators, and ideally they will be compiled by countries themselves. That also means that we have to have a step-by-step process where we start from the data that exist and capacities we have now and gradually enhance the indicator set with new metrics. For instance, we have done some new work on biodiversity statistics and governance statistics, which are currently being developed and potentially can inform this framework in the future. Here's what the UN Secretary General's policy brief recommends as the next steps. First, he calls for a renewed political commitment to go beyond GDP and value what counts. The SDG summit in September last year offered the first discussion among member states, and the high-level political forum confirmed the political commitment to explore measures of progress that complement GDP. And member states called for a United Nations-led intergovernmental discussion on beyond GDP. So as Stefan was saying, we expect that this discussion will continue until the Summit of the Future to be held in September this year. And hopefully from there on, we will have some clear step marks as to where to go next. Secondly, as there's keen interest on what the indicators could be, the Secretary General is likely to launch a process to develop a dashboard of indicators, the key indicators 10 to 20, but this would be a scientific process resulting in a value dashboard that goes beyond GDP. Potentially, this work would be supported by a high-level expert group to ensure consultation and provide a sounding board to the effort. And third, SG underlined the need to undertake a major capacity building and resourcing initiative for member states to ensure that all countries can measure progress beyond GDP. He notes that this effort should match the global efforts that were undertaken for decades to build capacity on the SNA and the GDP. So we're definitely in for some interesting times in statistics, where your leadership in the UN Statistical Commission, in your countries, in your organizations, will be central to shaping these future metrics, including on based on lots of the work that has already been done in international and national statistics. In the process, it turned out important that statisticians were involved early on because these discussions were technical relating to GDP and SNA, but at the same time political, where also many impressions about what the GDP is come to play. And we wanted to ensure that there will be a high standard for the data that would inform the effort to go towards more balanced decision-making that considers not only economic, but also the social and environmental aspects and others. We were very happy to see that the UN Secretary General wanted to bring up this issue of capacity building needs at that level of the three major recommendations that he provided. So this year, we expect to see many meetings that will discuss beyond GDP and many consultations with membership of different organizations and discussions on what and how should we measure these indicators and what are the issues that matter for member states, for people, and for the planet. We hope that the UN Statistical Commission be the host of the future set of metrics, and potentially the Summit of the Future could have that discussion and task this work to the Statistical Commission for the methodology development and indicator selection. In general, I wanted to finish by saying that data is really high on the global agenda now. We have been also through very tricky challenges during the COVID pandemic that has required us to rethink some of the processes in statistical production. And now we're also trying to match the increasing data needs. This seems to continue. The role of reliable data will be key to global development. And now ahead of Davos, we saw that false information was selected as the #1 threat globally for the global economy. Official statisticians really have a big role to play. We need to be geared up for the new priorities and to ensure that what matters for people universally counts in our metrics. With this, I let us land to the SNA. Back to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Anu, for this very concise panoramic flight of the political context that we are in here. I like that you make us feel good that we are in high demand. And so we need to be also, I know we are willing and capable of stepping up to these challenges. And one of our primary tool is, of course, our SNA. And the SNA, this is also opportune, is undergoing a review and updating a regular process by 2025. And that is, of course, full and center on the agenda of the Statistical Commission. And we were very lucky, and I say we as a global community, to have Peter and Pete leading this effort, because at this particular moment, I believe there are probably over 100 people around the world working on the SNA update in different task teams, looking at specific aspects and technical aspects. And so this is really classical Statistical Commission work. But you need somebody to lead it. So Peter Harper is our project manager and has done a fantastic job over the last couple of years. This has been going on since 2021 and will culminate hopefully in the 2025 adoption of the SNA. And Peter van der Ven is now very busy as the lead editor of actually drawing it all together and putting it all into one book of several hundred pages. So what do we have there? I turn the floor over to, I think, Pete, you start.
I am. I'm going to share my screen. Can people see the screen? Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to start off by making some introductory comments. Then I will hand over to Peter, who will talk more specifically about the changes that are proposed for the 2025 SNA, with a particular focus on better measuring wellbeing. And then I will come back and make a few comments about where to from here in regard to the update. Firstly, I'd like to just remind people of a few elements of the relationship between the system of national accounts and measuring wellbeing and sustainability. And I'll start off with a very obvious comment that the system of national accounts is more than GDP. It provides a comprehensive statistical framework for the organisation of data that provides credible, comparable and authoritative data on economic activity suitable for all countries. So in other words, there's thousands of statistics in the SNA. And because of that, the SNA can contribute appropriately to the wider objective of measuring wellbeing and sustainability. And it does this in two ways. Firstly, within what is now called the sequence of accounts, what used to be the core accounts. There are a wide range of data and aggregate measures that can be used to inform discussion of important aspects of material wellbeing and sustainability. For example, household adjusted disposable income, final consumption and wealth, the government's impact on distribution of income, and so on. The second way in which the SNA contributes to this broader objective of measuring well-being is that can be extended and adapted to organise data on the social and environmental dimensions of well-being and sustainability. And here the classic example is the system of environmental and economic accounts, which is a complementary system to the SNA, which obviously focuses on environmental activity. But that said, the SNA does not claim, and it certainly is not provides a comprehensive measure of well-being and sustainability. So there is always going to be the need for additional measures. So some areas that the SNA really doesn't say much on are things like measures relating to safety and governance. So moving on to the update of the SNA. It's been 16 years since the SNA was last updated. Time flies quickly because both Peter and I were involved in the previous update. But in that last 16 years, as we know, there's been striking changes in the ways that economies operate. Digitalisation and globalisation have had profound impacts. And as we know, there's increasing concern that economic decisions need to be considered within a broader framework of well-being and sustainability, including environmental sustainability. And with these drivers, we would expect that there could be substantive change to the SNA in order to reflect these changes. It's essential that the national accounts remain relevant in a changing world, and that's important to maintain the credibility of the national accounts in the eyes of not just policymakers, but the broader community. And we want to maintain and ideally increase the support for national account statistics and the statistical organisations that produce them. And the SNA update is proceeding in parallel with the update of the International Monetary Fund's Balance of Payments Manual, with the aim of achieving maximum harmonisation across those two standards. So how do we get to the recommendations for changes to the SNA? They've been mainly derived from guidance notes and issues notes, and I'll talk about those shortly, but also some work that's been done in the past that was promulgated in things like the SNA news and notes and guidance that's been provided in past AEG meetings and so on. But the main source of recommendations for change comes from guidance notes, and these guidance notes were the result of extensive research undertaken by task teams comprised of experts in relevant fields, and this work included, where relevant, feasibility studies. Importantly, there were extensive consultation on the guidance notes and the other substantive issues related to the update, including global consultation processes, and they were very well received in terms of the amount of feedback that we got from those processes. The advisory expert group on national accounts carefully deliberated on the guidance notes and the issues notes in determining the recommendations for changes to the 2008 SNA, obviously taking into account the outcome of the global consultations. Those recommendations were then consolidated into a document which was circulated for global consultation in August and September last year. And as a result of the feedback from that global consultation, that document has been updated, and it's now for consideration and hopefully formal endorsement by the Commission at its upcoming meeting. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Peter, and he'll talk to us about the main changes that are proposed for the accounts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete. I will focus on the key changes related to accounting for well-being and sustainability. And in doing so, I will all the time make a distinction between what happens within the sequence of economic accounts, as we call it. We used to call it the core framework. So we had the core framework and satellite accounts. We hated that terminology because it had a bad connotation. So we now refer to the sequence of economic accounts, within the sequence of economic accounts, and beyond the sequence of economic accounts. And then when looking at environmental sustainability especially, what you will observe within the sequence of economic accounts is that we recognize natural capital as a separate class of assets. We think it's important to put more focus on natural capital. We also recognize depletion as a cost of production, and that would affect net measures, net domestic product, net national income, etc. There's an explicit recognition of renewable energy resources, so energy which comes from wind turbines, solar panels, etc. There's more attention to accounting for non-renewable energy resources. I won't go into the details, but we will have a split asset approach, as it is called, in line with the system of environmental economic accounting. There's much more guidance on measurement as well. And there's more explicit guidance on accounting for biological resources yielding once only products. So that you think of the growth of trees for timber production, fish, etc. And finally, explicit guidance on accounting for production of electricity and heating by households for sale and own final use. So there's a lot happening in this field. Beyond sequence of economic accounts, we have an excellent set of statistical standards, which is the SEA, the System of Environmental Economic Accounting. And we don't want to redo this work. This is very complementary to the system of national accounts. So it directly gives the picture on provides the data on accounting for environmental sustainability. It's and I would like to emphasize here as well is the excellent work that has been done in ecosystem accounting, which is, I think, really revolutionary, this set of standards that we have now. And so the SNA, the SEA complements in this sense the SNA. Looking at well-being aspects within the sequence of economic accounts, there will be more attention for distributional issues by introducing standard breakdowns of households by income decile in line with the relevant aggregates in the national accounts. So the household disposable income, household financial consumption, household wealth, and all of this to better account for the distribution of income, consumption, saving, and wealth. There will also be a more elaborated set of labor accounts, providing more detailed information on various types of employment. All of this is closely aligned with the ICLS. So the next one. When it comes to beyond the sequence of economic accounts, what we truly want is to encourage the development of a suite of thematic and extended accounts to support the analysis of well-being and sustainability as promoted via dashboards of indicators. So Anu spoke about the structure, the SDGs. What we try to do here is to provide a suite of accounts which can support the analysis which can support the measurement of these outcomes which are relevant for well-being. So we would like to encourage the compiling accounts for unpaid household activities, accounts for health and social conditions in line with the satellite health accounts, accounts for education and training in line with relevant satellite accounts that have been developed in the past, also thinking of experimental measures of human capital. So the next. All of this is a very pragmatic approach, using areas which have gained prominence also by way of practical experience in the recent past. And what we think is really good about this suite of accounts is that it can provide a link with, I should say, with, not between, policy and research and certain aspects of well-being, because it will provide, for example, data on the production of financing of services which contribute to outcomes of certain aspects of well-being. If we talk about health, you need to know much more about how can we improve, what policies can improve these health outcomes, and that is very much related to, for example, the provision of health services. It also allows for the analysis of interrelationships, the trade-offs and the win-wins between the various aspects of well-being. It has the potential to introduce further extensions in the future based on user demands and practical experience. So it's really trying to support these dashboards and the analysis and of what happens in these dashboards. As a final remark, we will have 3 new chapters on the contribution that the SNA can make to the measurement of well-being. One is a chapter really upfront on national accounts and measures of well-being and sustainability. What role can the SNA play? What can it not play? And we have a specific chapter on measuring well-being and also measuring sustainability of well-being. So now I hand over back to Pete. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Peter. In terms of going forward, firstly, there's a glossary of terms and definitions which cover all macroeconomic statistics that has been prepared. The chapters of the 2025 SNA are currently being prepared, and that is being done in close coordination with the Balance of Payments Manual update. The chapters which are either new or substantially revised are currently undergoing global consultation on a chapter-by-chapter basis. And in mid-2024, there will be global consultation on the whole of the draft of the 2025 SNA, which will include the other chapters. Those are the chapters that are not new or substantially revised, with the aim that the 2025 SNA will be submitted to the UNSC meeting next year for its endorsement. Importantly, there will be a digital version of the 2025 SNA to complement the traditional paper version, and translation of the SNA into languages other than English will follow in 2025. There's also the issue of implementation to consider, and it's recognised that if there are significant changes to the SNA, then these may be challenging to implement. And for this reason, it's critical that the update be accompanied by a well-thought-out implementation strategy, which includes developing guidance for countries to produce robust, high-quality and international comparable statistics. And this strategy is being prepared at the moment, and it will also be presented to the 2025 UNSC meeting for its endorsement. Another key aspect of that strategy will be advocating for the resources to make the requisite changes to the national accounts. In terms of implementation guidance, we're already starting on that, and a number of task teams will work through 2024 to develop compilation guidance in the key areas of concern in regard to the proposed changes, and that compilation guidance will also be subject to global consultation in due course. So just to conclude, we need to recognise the importance of looking at ways in which the SNA can support the measurement of wellbeing and sustainability, and as Peter explained, this will be enhanced in the 2025 SNA. It has been 16 years since the SNA was last updated, so it's important that the 2025 SNA is credible in the eyes of policymakers and the broader community, and we believe that that will require substantive change to the SNA. But we also need to take account of the implementation issues, and as I said, they've been actively considered. And it's worth noting that it is likely to be several years before countries will actually implement the 2025 SNA, thus giving a substantial time period to prepare for the implementation. So that brings us to the close of our presentation, Stefan. So I'd like to thank everybody and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I think you were able to convey to us in the last 10-15 minutes that we are all in very good hands with this very complex and complicated process. So thank you very much. And thank you very much making forcefully that argument that, yes, the SNA is so much more than just GDP. which most people know. It's an amazing toolbox, and I think even us as statisticians, we have not even understood fully what we can do with all of it and various disaggregations and extended analysis. So it's going to be an amazing ride once the new SNA is on the table. But this is also one of the concerns. I mean, if we have an implementation period from 25 to 28 or 30 to implement the SNA, I would like to hope that if there is a beyond GDP measure, that would also have to be accompanied by a capacity building program, as Anu said at the very beginning, that these two things would be well coordinated and anchored and integrated and not some kind of separate, parallel, stumbling along processes. So that's one of my perhaps most fundamental concerns at this point. So 3 little housekeeping announcements in the middle of this all. We're having a little bit of problems with the language of the meeting, so please do not change it away from English. I think English is still the language that we all speak best. Apparently, this is possible that an individual could change the language, but please do not do that. Second point is I was watching our participation numbers, and we are now over 200. So that's a testimony to the relevance of this important event. And the third point is please start using the chat if you have any questions or comments, and so that we sort of open the next round of this event by having interactions. So and I'll keep monitoring it with my team, and we can start having some interesting thoughts or questions there. Okay, the next speaker is Richard, and he will tell us a little bit about our also process under the Statistical Commission of the Network of Economic Statisticians to canvass a little bit the territory of beyond GDP, what is happening in countries at the regional or at the sectoral level, and what are ideas of how we can take this forward or preliminary conclusions. So Richard, you've been leading this very much, this process with the network of the economic statisticians. Thank you for that. Please share with us your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Richard Hayes. I'm a Bureau member of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians. We're a relatively new grouping. I hope your organisations have been able to engage with us. And if you haven't, I will, following my talk, put our contact email into the chat. So if you do wish to join the network and get to see the events and that we are organising, we're very much welcome you and look forward to your participation. The background here, very much as Anu outlined, we took that as jumping off point. Is worth saying the network very much is there for us to consider frontier issues, rising issues that we haven't yet created wider infrastructure to address, and very clearly the issues that Anu has outlined were one of those that we wanted to prioritize and that we brought into our first package of work. Anu mentioned that robust technical and scientific process. We're not claiming to be that. We are looking to do essentially, and have been looking to do, pathfinding and mapping, initial mapping work, so that we have good materials when we start that process formally that give us a really good picture of the current landscape and what is happening. To give you some idea of our journey over the last couple of years, we started with a sprint series. We organize ourselves and our work through a series of sprints. These are short sessions, couple of hours, number of speakers, opportunity to raise questions that then we take and build on through the series to get to a report at the end. In 2022, we ran a series on effectively what is beyond GDP to undertake that mapping work. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That led to a research prospectus that we submitted to the Commission last year. which led to a new sprint series on how we're delivering beyond GDP, what are all the various pieces of work which are out there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our recommendations from that, which we will be submitting as a backing document to the Commission in a month or so's time. So our first sprint series, 6 sessions, 38 presenters, lots of discussion, wide-ranging set of views. And I think here we began to immediately see some of the key issues that we had. Beyond GDP can be a very difficult branding if you are not very aware of what GDP means. It can be a little bit of a barrier. We also have conflicting branding around well-being, SDGs. There's lots of different ways and lots of different communities who are heavily active in this space. And as one of our sprint attendees said, I never realized my work on well-being was part of what you call beyond GDP. I think immediately raised our awareness that we needed to be thinking in a far more multidisciplinary way. And whilst we're the network of economic statisticians, we've therefore been working to reach out as far as we can across these communities. And once you start to do that, you realize the huge amount of work which has been ongoing globally, at least in the last 15 years, if not longer. And that inevitably led us to needing a second set of sprints to get to the level of depth that we were looking and hoping to provide. I think within this, one of the things that we also particularly noted was that whilst as a statistical community, we're thinking about how we can provide better data, one of the key things that we spotted was that many users find the complexity of the current landscape very challenging, and guidance on how to navigate and find which is the best metric for their policy question is a really key aspect of the work that we're going to need to undertake over coming years. So our research prospectus in 2022 proposed essentially 2 blocks of work. The first was to develop a wider network of statistical guidance that could support well-being in particular, and then thinking more about what that well-being measurement would look like. It's worth saying, for shorthand, I'm going to talk about a system of population and social statistics. That name is very much, up for discussion. I think we have repeatedly said it's not for the network of economic statisticians to be articulating how other domains should be organizing themselves, or indeed whether this needs to be a physical document. But our feeling is that inevitably, when we come to thinking about measuring well-being and the beyond GDP landscape, we want to achieve some core things. The first is we're going to want to reuse as much data as possible to reduce the burden on NSIs. Stefan has mentioned the need for capacity building, but we can take sensible steps that can keep that within manageable bounds. Secondly, we need coherency, so the data that is produced in the social sphere needs to align to data in the economic sphere, needs to align to data in the environmental sphere. And we want to be able to draw from these coherently to bring together guidance and outputs dashboards which are coherent, don't double count key issues or present different perspectives on the key issues, and allow us to understand the trade-offs between the different data that we will inevitably be presenting in these dashboards. We presented these recommendations to the 54th meeting of the Commission, which were supported. In parallel to the work that we've been doing, there is a new Friends of the Chair group for social and demographic statistics, who obviously we view as having far more ownership of that system of population and social statistics space than we do. As Peter have just outlined, there's many areas where economic statistics and social statistics overlap, and so that we need to be making the right contribution to that discussion, but that the Friends of the Chair group have been taking forward initiatives in this space to understand what the potential is and what the benefits of such work would be. And I think that's really important that we're able to evidence the benefits of taking some of these steps, which led us to our second sprint series, which we've held this in 2023. This was a series of 6 sprints. I'm not going to run through all these slides blow by blow. This is just really to give you a picture of what we've been covering. But essentially, we've been looking at the latest work on well-being and beyond GDP, looking at what's happening with the new research programs in Europe and other parts of the world. Looking in particular at how different areas, different geographies will be thinking about this. Thinking about new data sources, environmental, social and governance data from the private sector is a new area of resources that we haven't necessarily thought about in depth in this space, but understanding what the capacity is there. I think there's the picture we're getting is that there's still a lot of variation, and the need for the ISSB, who have been producing standards and standard metrics in this space, that seems to present an opportunity for us to have a new data source that may be very useful in this landscape. We've then looked at domestic wellbeing dashboards, so the dashboards produced by a variety of countries around the world. Anu has talked about the need for us to have a core set of data that we can compare across countries. But what's very clear is that many countries ground those in a dashboard with additional measures which support their local understanding and tailored to their specific needs and requirements. And then we took on looking in depth at 2 particular areas. The Peters have just talked to us about distributional work, and particularly distributional work focused on households, but there is other work looking at individuals as well as looking at income and wealth distributions over longer time periods. And we see there a lot of opportunity to bring that together and begin to tell more coherent narratives between those. And then looking at the complexities of dashboards versus single measure or composite indices. We know many users prefer simpler measures, and a dashboard can sometimes be quite a daunting tool to attempt to master. So how and where we can get benefits from across these. So in conclusion, we've been able to bring this together, as I say, into a report for the Commission. I think we see that there's a rich set of models of domestic dashboards. These vary in size from sort of the 10 to 20 to 60 plus, but are often tailored to domestic need. Subjective well-being, I think, is a really important component here. The Peters talked about sort of the objective measure of economic aspects of well-being that we see coming from the SNA. There will be objective measures of other aspects of well-being, whether that be governance or housing that we draw from other areas, but equally subjective measures. There is a growing evidence base and science base in this field, which means that we see subjective measures of happiness, including stress and other factors, could well be a very key part of the picture here. We see really strong front runners in the way in views of measuring distributions, which we see that whilst they are subtly different, I think there are transparency there that we can see how you can bring those together and tell a concerted story on distributions. And similarly on sustainability and the measurement of capitals, again, we have included work comparing and contrasting these. And I think, again, whilst they have differences in methods and scope, we can understand those and we can tell a concerted story. Similarly with dashboards and composite indices. So our recommendation to finish off is very much looking at recycling and reusing best practice. If we're serious in this space, we see the need for a similar type of infrastructure to the work of the ISW-GNA to bring together the wide community who are active here. Very much this is, and I think the key word there is wide. This is not just an economics issue. We will need representative bodies from across those social, environmental and economic domains. That group can then undertake the key next stage of commissioning, reviewing research and work to propose a draft text on the FISW. On the SPSS, the social work, I think is really important that we allowed the Friends of the Chair on Social and Demographic Statistics time to mature its work programme and to deliver in that space. I'm very much minded that I'm probably just about on the time, so I will pause there and pass back to you, Stefan.
Wonderful, Richard. And I know you had a really particular challenge of condensing all the rich discussions that took place during those various sprints into this presentation. In this context, let me tell you all of our slides will be made available on the website of this event. So if you missed something, and so you can go back there and reread it. Also, I see the chat is very active where additional material is being shared from the network, and also Arno put the policy brief there. So, and the background material. So if you want to dig deeper, you definitely have the tools right there. And one thing that Richard just alluded to, I find particularly exciting what is happening right now is, of course, in order to address these larger issues of well-being and sustainability, this will require that even within our community, certain sub-communities that have a very distinct identity, like national accountants or social statisticians or environmental statisticians, will have to talk to each other. And I think this is a very interesting challenge for us as a community, but also showing the rest of the world, because what is true in the measurement area is true in the policy area also, that these people who sometimes speak different languages, they have to talk to each other, otherwise we can't solve these problems. And I think we have created the models and the tools in the Statistical Commission to do just that. So, talking about Statistical Commission, Gabriela, you are the boss, you are the chair of it all, you have to bring it all together. So some final concluding wise words, what are your takeaways, what are your recommendations and views for a path forward after all this material that we have seen? Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Dear colleagues, friends, participants at this very exciting event on how we can propose new metrics and hopefully a statistical framework of an integrated approach to economic progress, sustainability and well-being. I am glad that by now nobody talks about replacing GDP with other metrics, but rather about complementing measures of economic progress by a broader set of indicators to present an integrated picture assessing the environmental and social aspects of progress. This policy initiative did not come out of the blue. Statisticians have sensed over the past few years the need for such an integrated approach, as policies tend to place people and the planet more and more into the center. We saw that from Anu's presentation of the Secretary General's brief. The responsibility towards people of today and towards future generations is becoming increasingly important in policies and in the data and information that policymakers require to underpin and monitor policies. Fortunately, we do not have to start from scratch. As we saw from the presentations earlier today, there are global, regional, and national initiatives, tools, and experiences in the statistical community that we can build on. I would like to refer to only a few examples that we heard about in more detail from the speakers today. The system of national accounts can already now contribute to measuring well-being and sustainability, data on household disposable income, final consumption and wealth, government impact on distribution of income, etc. The SNA is under revision, as we heard, 16 years after the adoption of the current version. The proposed revisions contain many aspects of broadening the scope of SNA, focusing on accounting for well-being and sustainability. Accounting rules and structures applied in the SNA were adapted to organize data on the environmental dimension of sustainability in the system of environmental economic accounting. Other thematic and extended accounts have also been elaborated or are under elaboration. The ongoing work, as Richard also mentioned, on demographic and social statistics by the Friends of the Chair group is likely to develop a system of population and social accounts. And let us not forget that our SDG indicators themselves answer already a lot of questions raised by the new policy demands on GDP and beyond. These are ongoing developments that move us towards new metrics to assess economic, environmental, social, and vulnerability aspects in an integrated manner. Despite previous achievements, the statistical community obviously still has a lot to do to build such a new structure. The Commission cannot do it alone. The value framing is a political exercise. It needs political discussions and decisions. Statisticians need to provide the metrics when the goals have been defined. Remember that this was also the process for the SDG indicators. Politicians framed the 17 goals and 169 targets, and the Statistical Commission delivered the indicators. I should mention remarkably fast. It was that we produced the indicators, the first set of indicators after the goals and targets were adopted. Developing such a framework, if it is a framework, I'm not so sure, because I'm sure that the need is very urgent to produce some metrics, some indicators, some dashboard, a dashboard, and probably that does not allow enough time to formulate a complex framework. But I'm also sure that in the end, it will have to be channeled into a statistical framework, a standard, in order to make it really work and to make sure that all the interactions, interdependencies, and interrelations are catered for in the end, between the indicators are catered for in the end. Still, I will call it a framework for the time being. Sometimes I call it only metrics. Developing such a framework will need consultations and cooperation with other data communities and with academia. There is a lot of information and capability outside the statistical system. We all know we have interactions with them that can be involved and will contribute to building the new metrics. As in the case of SDG indicators, the new statistical framework has to comply with the quality criteria of official statistics in order to be trusted. Quality, transparency, trustworthiness are among the main assets of official statistics. We always have to remember that there are many data producers outside official statistics. Our comparative advantage in the competition are quality, sound and transparent methodology, and our ethical values. Among quality dimensions, I would specifically mention that as the information we derive from the framework or the various indicators has to be comparable over time and across countries. We are not only serving global strategies and policies, national and regional data needs are as important as the global needs. We have learned from previous strategies and agendas that in order to be generally implemented, the whole process of developing the new framework and metrics has to be country-owned, and it has to be applicable in all countries. This also means that we should opt for indicators that can be produced now or in the near future in all countries. And let us not forget that to be implementable and successful, any normative definition of a GDP and beyond metric will have to be accompanied by a very massive capacity building campaign. We saw that also in the SDG development, indicator development, but we also saw that maybe capacity building was not sufficient at that time, and I think we should really increase the capacity building capabilities to make sure that implementation in all countries is possible. When building the new metrics, we have to keep in mind that changes in economy, society, and the environment have accelerated, and policies adapt to this acceleration. This has to be acknowledged by aiming at frameworks and metrics that are flexible enough to accommodate new developments and new demands that arise in the future. So we have to anticipate what will happen to make sure that we can also produce sufficient information, data and information for the future needs. I am confident that the Statistical Commission is able to cope with this enormous challenge. We have proven our ability to adequately respond to crisis situations like the pandemic and the ongoing war. A peacetime challenge like developing a new integrated statistical framework should be a routine exercise, even if it is an enormous exercise. So let us roll up our sleeves. And as my esteemed predecessor, John Pullinger, urged us a few years ago at the time when the SDG indicators were built, step on the gas. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Gabriela, for this wonderful and very confident and upbeat note to finish our discussions. So thank you to all of the speakers. I think the most important thing was really to bring everybody up to speed in a way, because there are these various processes, but they are of course all connected going on, and I hope one of the fundamental and nice purposes of the Statistical Commission session meeting is to bring all of this together. And in the Statistical Commission session, there are so many strings that are related to this discussion: the SNA debate, the Social Friends of the Chair on Social Statistics, the CEO debate, the issue, the discussion on the SDGs, the big data and data governance. So all of this is related here. And but we need to also ask ourselves the question of how do we best take this forward, and how do we dose our energy? How do we work with other partners? That is very important. Let's also remember this year we have a World Data Forum in Colombia later this year. So we have also several mechanisms within the global statistical community to work and move things forward. And but I was intrigued by two aspects in the presentations. One is, Gabriela just touched on it, what is actually the name of the beast? Do we call it a metric, a framework, a dashboard, or an index? We moved a little bit away from this. And then the other important message that Gabriela just sent, and I want to re-emphasize, is the word quality. I really think this is our collective contribution to keep it real, to make sure that whatever comes out of these political processes also at the end has an appropriate level of quality. And then, of course, capacity. I always say it 100 times, and I'm very, very happy that we were able, Anu and our colleague in UNDP and the whole UN statistical community, to convince the Secretary General that work on beyond GDP does not stop the day we have a nice normative definition or framework or metric, or, as I said, whatever the beast is, defined. That's only the beginning, because then we really have, we all know that, have to have implementation. And it means that we need to invest and make sure that it's built and produced all over the world. So I hope you found this all inspiring. Now the floor is open to you. Any kind of specific questions, debate. I think the way this works, you could either use the chat to put in a question. I think I see a little bit of activity in the chat already, but please feel free to use it and ask a particular question. Or share an idea or a proposal. Or I think I have to ask my own tech team, is it possible for people to raise their hands and we can enable them to speak? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
But let's just do it.
Hi. Yes, if you raise your hand, then someone will open your mic so that you can take the floor. Thanks.
Okay, is there anybody brave enough to jump in? I see our chat lighting up. I think in the chat there were a number of comments thanking for this presentation. There was one question, I think, that had to do with working with our partners in the civil society and also academia and research community. Obviously, this is something that no community can do alone. I'm trying to catch up reading on the chat. Does anybody want to ask a question?
There are many, no?
Yes, I need to ask my panelists to help me to read the chat. And if you see something that you want to respond to, please just let us know. Richard.
There was a question about the particular nature of the framework for inclusive sustainable well-being, which I've tried to answer, but effectively, is it the same as a system, or is it something different? Is it closer to the SDGs? And effectively, I've put a little bit in the sidebar to say, I think we see it more as a bridge. The system should define how we create data, but there's something about how we draw that data together, how we present it, how we explain the trade-offs, how we help navigate users to the right metric for their particular policy problem, that I see the FISW being the tool that helps us to present that and join that information together. I would hope that the FISW wouldn't be laying out how to create lots of additional data. The systems should tell us how we create high quality data. The FISW should help us to navigate how to use it. But that's my view. I'm sure as we go through consultation, other views might emerge and things will develop. So hopefully that assists.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, Gabriela.
But I think that we have so many data already, as we saw in the presentations, and there is much beyond that. We really need to take stock. I think it was mentioned at the beginning of this session, to take stock of what we have and try to organize it in a manner that is useful for this new approach, because all the data that we produce are useful for something. They are already in use for policy and other purposes, but to combine all this information, and that is what I'm saying, to eventually channel it into a framework to make sure that the interdependencies, the interrelations are obvious and can be shown. That is the big question. One is the stock taking and to show what data we have and how they can be used. And the other is to channel them all, to compile them all into a concise framework, into a logical framework.
Thank you. There's also one question. I'm catching up here with how would this GDP metric differ from other metrics such as the Human Development Index? Perhaps, Anu, you could say something about that, because we've had a long discussion among ourselves. And of course, our colleagues from UNDP were sitting at the table, and helping us to frame this SG Secretary General policy brief. Anu, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. I'm not sure there's an easy answer to this, but it's not necessarily how other indicators will differ from Beyond GDP or how Beyond GDP metrics would differ from the existing indicators. The question is more, how can we reorganize, like Gabriel was saying, the information we have into a form that is easily used by policymakers, that reflects on the current challenges. For instance, Human Development Index is a very important metrics. Some of the Beyond GDP dashboard metrics could be existing indicators that are out there, One of the criteria, though, is that it should bring complementary messages to GDP. That is, it would not correlate directly with GDP. So that can be a challenge for many indicators. Maybe we will not be able to really achieve a perfect set of indicators that do not correlate with GDP, because GDP is such an important metric. But for instance, there was also a question related to well-being measures, and I think if well-being is actually not that far from economic progress, because if people are doing well, if they don't have to struggle for their livelihood, to find food and shelter, they have more time to be innovative. If they are well educated, we have higher human capital. That's likely to be reflected also in economic growth. And because of these interconnections, there are likely to be some correlations between the indicators in any case. But I think it will need to be a consultative process where different stakeholders, different experts of, for instance, climate change and statistics and biology and economists talk together and policymakers talk together, so that we ensure that the dashboard that we come up with will reflect the current challenges and the needs of policymakers and the member states, so that we can ensure more sustainable and inclusive progress in the future. That some indicators that do not measure economic development directly be used together with measures of the economy. And there was also a question of how this process would be organized in relation to think tanks and researchers and academia. So we hope that there will be many consultations this year. We know already of several different organizations and actors can organize debates and bring this feedback back to the UN. The SDG Lab, for instance, in Geneva, has reached out to youth networks from across countries and is working together with academics, having discussions on what is it that matters for people and what data gaps do we currently have, what data do we have that is already relevant for this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that last point is also in the chat, something that resonates, of course, very strongly. We are all statistical managers. I mean, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but always the fundamental principle, number one, has to be, what do we already have that we can build upon? I have the two Peters. Peter van der Ven, you had your hand up first. Let me go to you, and then...
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. I wanted to explicitly support what Gabriela said during her last intervention. As I see it, we do have sets of indicators which describe well-being and sustainability, but we need more than a set of indicators. All these indicators, they are not loose indicators, they are very much interrelated with each other. And if you have these set of indicators, a logical question is, how can we affect the outcomes of these indicators? How can we affect this? How can we study their interrelationships through research, but how can we affect them through policy, for example? That will be an immediate question coming from our policy bosses, to put it that way. And I do firmly believe that we need to think in terms of frameworks, developing frameworks to show the interconnections between these indicators. And in that sense, I think it's very important that we look at statistics in a much more integrated manner. We don't have these pillars of economic statistics, a pillar of environmental statistics, a pillar of social statistics, etc., etc. We need to think about statistics in a much more integrated manner. And this requires a different way of thinking. This requires a lot of cooperation between, for example, we see it already in the field of distributional measures of income, consumption, and wealth. we need the cooperation with the social statisticians and very close cooperation and exchange of views on how we can bring the data together. So I think that that's an important task that we have ahead of us in statistics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Pete, and then I have a hand from Dr. Mishra. We can perhaps make sure that he can speak to us afterwards. Yeah.
Thanks, Stefan. There's a question in the chat about challenges in implementing the SNA 2025. And these are challenges, I think, with developing any new statistic. Firstly, getting the resources and here guidance on advocacy, I think, is important. Secondly, finding the appropriate data sources. Thirdly, developing appropriate methodologies for high quality, internationally comparable data. And I talked in my presentation about some of the work that's going on in that area. The development of systems to produce the estimates, and I think we need to provide countries with guidance there. And lastly, the general issue of capacity building and looking at what training and technical assistance can be provided to countries in order to assist them with implementing the SNA 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Dr. Mishra. Can you, did I get this correctly? I don't know whether we can, whether my team can see the hand.
We have enabled the mic and the camera. So if you would like to take the floor, you can open the mic, Dr. Mishra.
I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, my video may be not there. Okay. So thank you all, and it's really a very good effort by all the experts in the national accounts and beyond GDP for this webinar. It's a very learning session for me because I'm a new, and I have only one limited question, some concern I can say. I need some clarification from the experts. See, we have, there is a future dashboard approach here. It is there in your write-up, and also we listen to some mention about the future dashboard. Regarding the future dashboard, any dashboard nowadays, by click of the mouse, one has to get all the information. It is a welcome step. My only concern, why it is limited to only this national accounts and GDP related. The dashboard will have many components. Why this particular group should handle the dashboard thing? Because dashboard will include national accounts, but both regional, global, national statistics, and taking resources from all kinds of data source. And then dashboard is a composite. It's because we all prepare dashboards, so it's a multi-dimensional and it gives a visualization and everything there. So dashboard is very useful, no doubt about it. So why this national accounts arena, it should be confined to that only? Because in that case, maybe the dashboard will be overloaded towards the national accounts, GDP and income indicators, and other indicators may be lost in between. So if your purpose is to bring this dashboard, and yes, we should have a dashboard, no doubt, then it should be a multi effort, and it should be in some other group, or that should be my view only. And official, I represent India. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Gabriela, you want to respond to that?
If I may, I think the whole idea is that the dashboard, or whatever metrics we are talking about, we are not sure about the definition, but anyway, the dashboard would be an output of the Statistical Commission. And the commission, of course, is composed of many statisticians. It's composed of all the chief statisticians, and the statistical commissions a group of experts to work on this. But that group of experts, of course, has to be a complex group. It has to there have to be national accountants, of course, in it, because accounting frameworks are really important in this respect. But it, of course, has to have social and demographic statisticians, environmental statisticians, health statisticians, all kinds of statistics that are relevant, governance statistics, all kinds of statistics that are relevant for well-being. So it's not national accountants who will be leading, let's say, the process, but they, of course, will be part of the process, as many other expert fields in statistics will be part of the process. But of course, it is an output of the Statistical Commission, of the whole commission. And eventually the indicators, the framework, if there is a standard in the end, the standard will be developed and presented by the Statistical Commission itself.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, this was an important clarification. I think the dashboard is supposed to be very broad. And when we had discussions in the UN system, there were, for instance, proposals that there needs to be a human rights indicator in a dashboard like that, because if we are talking about trying to capture well-being, there is, of course, a lot of people would argue very strongly that an indication of the human rights situation in a country has to be part of that dashboard, also in a sense of sustainability, because if people's rights are not guaranteed, there would be some issues of social sustainability in a way. So, but that is also precisely the reason why the Statistical Commission alone this cannot be subcontracted to the, I would not like to have a situation where the political level now washes their hands in innocence and says the Statistical Commission should come up with a dashboard, because the first step is a political and a policy debate. What Anu so nicely framed as the value framework? What is important value for the future? Once this has been defined, then the statisticians can make an important and immediate contribution in saying, yeah, we already have measures for that, and this and this and this can be has been already compiled all over the world. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So that is a bit the proposal of the current way forward.
Thank you very much. It's fair enough. Got the clarification.
Thank you for your question. Peter, do you want to add to that?
No, I actually wanted to add to a question which was raised in the chat,
okay,
if it's okay with you. There was a question, are we interested in a super GDP, which is a GDP adjusted for externalities on the environment, development of human capital, social developments, etc., or are we focusing on having a list of indicators like the SDGs or the OECD framework or a dashboard of indicators? And I would definitely say that the latter is the objective. We are not looking for a GDP, a super GDP adjusted for all kinds of externalities, because I would say we easily get into not measuring what is, but measuring what if, and you will get into general equilibrium modeling, etc. And I think that goes beyond the task of statisticians. What we can do is provide all the tools for researchers to do that kind of modeling. We can provide all the data in environmental economic accounting, for example, on all the externalities in physical terms, the CO2 emissions or other air emissions or emissions to water, which can be used for general equilibrium modeling purposes. And also, I think we are not yet there that we can come up with a summary indicator of all the aspects which contribute to well-being or sustainability of well-being. But if we have that indicators, that also, I think, provides a way of experimenting with how can we aggregate that indicator. I think that we are not there yet. That I wanted to add. Thank you.
If I could just follow that, I think, you know, there's a real importance that we need a lot of countries to be able to produce data in those spaces to get to a point that we can experiment and to develop into that space. And that's why I sort of describe the FISW as a bridge between those statistical systems which create those components, because the FISW is probably an arena where we want to begin to capture what best practice in that space would look like. Because if people are going to go there, we may as well make sure that we're capturing what good looks like and encouraging best practice, because I think there are areas that we can see that developing over time. But I think, as Peter says, it's going to be a far longer journey than we can deliver in just one step.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'm also mindful of time now. We have reached the end of our period that we had reserved for this discussion. And of course, this is only the beginning of a discussion. We are nowhere near the end. I saw in the chat also some interesting references, and there was a bit of a discussion about questions about how is this related to the very valuable OECD work on well-being that has been going on for quite some time. And also there was a very welcome intervention with the work that we're doing with the regional commissions, that our friends in the regional commissions, of course, are helping us to communicate with the countries in the region and bringing those experiences and concerns, because policy concerns are also different, I mean, in different parts of the world. And that is always a bit the challenge with the global framework, that it is flexible enough to accommodate the fundamental global concerns, but also relevant for individual countries and so. So I think we had a very rich debate. If I may allow me to draw this to a conclusion, and I would like to really thank all of my speakers. I think you will now understand why I called them my dream team at the beginning. I think we had very different angles, but it was all very much to the point of where we are right now. There is a need to have a discussion, and it needs to bring together different of work streams that we are already working on. Again, I cannot emphasize my fundamental principle that we never start from scratch, but we always have a lot to build upon. This community is very rich, all of you. And we are committed to doing that. It's the beginning of a discussion. There will be more discussion. There may be more webinars and during the commission. So I hope I will see many of you in New York, and then we can continue these discussions. Also, please keep an eye on our websites, because our website is a very rich tool informing on what we are doing, when there are other events leading up to the Statistical Commission, but also what our partners are doing in the wider UN system, in the regional commissions, and so on and so forth. So I think this is a very exciting debate. We are in the middle of a shifting development paradigm. Planet and people are in the center of it, as Gabriela rightly said. We have a summit of the future coming up, and as statisticians, we need to be on the pulse of these big policy debates, so that we can deliver the numbers that will ultimately, the data that will ultimately be needed to drive our policy agendas. And my ambition is always to have the statisticians early at the table. I don't like it that we are always the afterthought, and first the big policy discussions take place, and then they call us up and say, hey guys, we need some numbers for this. No. We can be advisors. Statistics and data are the driver for policy agenda and for better development, and an enabler. So I think we will claim loudly and forcefully our rightful place at the table for this discussion, and bring in our fundamental principles, our concerns about quality, and as we discussed today. So in that sense, thank you very much. the panel, my team in the background that helped us run the event from a technical point of view, and of course all of you for your participation. And I'm looking forward to welcoming many of you in New York and continuing this debate in whatever forum over the next couple of months. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you very much and have a good day, rest of the day. Maria, do we have an organizational announcement to make?
Not at all. My mistake.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, take care around the world and thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.